everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So, for this session, we will do a focus on the labeling requirements for your food products. I am Anne-Claire Thibault. I am part of the R&I consulting company. We are specialized in regulatory and scientific affairs for more than 15 years. Our primary industries covered are nutrition products, medical devices, herbal medicines, pharmaceuticals, medical foods, cosmetics, bottled products, and more. So today we will focus on nutrition products, of course. I divided this session into three main parts. The first one concerns the main objectives and the updates for the regulation on the provision of information to consumer. Then we will focus on nutrition and health claim, with a focus on health claims, the particular case of pending claims, and the main opportunities for you for the future. The last part of the presentation will be dedicated to all the specific national requirements that could impact a multilingual packaging, and with a specific focus on the non-harmonized rules for clean and green labels. First, about the FIC regulation. It exists now for a long time because it was published in 2011, and its main objective was to ensure a high level of consumer protection in relation to food information. It establishes general principles, requirements, and responsibilities governing food information and helped to guarantee the right of consumers to information. Infographics was published by European Commission just after the publication of this regulation, and it shows in simple words all the changes and the improvements that was permitted by this new regulation. So we can see that thanks to this regulation, labelings are easier to read. Information on allergens are also emphasized. We now have access to information on the presence of engineered nanomaterials in our products. And also, we have more information on specific ingredients such as vegetable origin of refined oils and fats or other ingredients. Today, I wanted to remind you all the current mandatory information that you have to put in your labelings when you sell a food product. They are part of the regulation and are listed in the Article 9 and 10. Main ones concern, of course, the legal name of your food, which has to be added to your labeling, knowing the specific categories of interest you are facing. For example, for food supplement, we have a specific directive which says that the legal name for this kind of product should be food supplement. This has to be taken into account when preparing your food labeling. The second mandatory mention is the ingredient list, which has to be complete and in the descending order of weight, of course. We have lots of requirements for this ingredient list, but I wanted to highlight today the last news on this ingredient list. We have, for example, this year obtained a jurisprudence case on the use of vitamins and minerals in food products, and they're mentioned in the ingredient list. The conclusion of this jurisprudence case was that it is not mandatory for vitamins and minerals to add the specific forms that have been used. It means that you can keep in the ingredient list generic terms such as vitamin C, vitamin E, and not more specific forms such as tocopherol, etc. Another news for this year will be the new definition of nanomaterial. This is something we wait for a long time now, and normally we should have the general definition of nanomaterial published beginning of May. This should be part of the revision of recommendation 2011-696. Maybe we'll also have a new definition for engineered nanomaterial. Still, what is really difficult to confirm is the definition of intentional production and on thresholds. But even if it's difficult, we have the help from EFSA's assessment, which provides indications. So it should be part of the working group's agenda before the summer. In terms of allergens, what has changed a lot is not the list of allergens that are already recognized in EU, but more the fact to emphasize it in the ingredient list. To help you with this new request, you have some guidance that exists at the EU level that I highlighted just after. Other mandatory mentions are the following: the quantity of certain ingredients or categories of ingredients, the net quantity of your food, which can be expressed in net weight or net volume, the date of minimum durability, or the use by date, any special storage conditions and or conditions of use, the name or business name and address of your food business operator, which has to be within the EU. So pay attention for products that are coming from UK. You now need, of course, a EU address in your labeling, instructions for use if necessary, and also for beverages which would contain more than 1.2% by volume of alcohol, the actual alcoholic strength by volume. I put very really in bold the new mandatory mention also, which is the nutrition declaration, because this was a big news from this regulation. And from 2016, now we need to add energy, fat of which saturates, carbohydrates of which sugars, protein, and salt in each food labeling. So exemptions still occur and are detailed in the annexes of the regulation. But for all the products which are not exempted, you need to add this nutrition declaration. Also, the regulation adds some specific mention for some ingredients. So it can be, for example, for caffeine, phytosterols, this kind of ingredient, and also for some processes. So again, an extraction of the EC infographics, which shows that you need to add a date of freezing or first freezing for frozen meats, for example. You can have some exemptions for small labelings, but for that you have to be sure that you respect the corresponding requirements. In Europe, if we compare with other frameworks that are at international level, such as US one, for example, we do not have so much restrictions in terms of place of indication of the mandatory mentions. Only things that are mandatory are to respect a minimum font size equal or greater than 1.2 millimeter for general labelings, with some exemption for little packagings, and also to add the name of the food, the net quantity of the food, and the alcoholic strength by volume in the same field of vision. So it's not too restrictive in terms of place and sizes. Another thing that you need to take into account is the fact that normally voluntary mention should not be displayed to the detriment of the space available for mandatory information, of course. It is the Annex 4 that specifies the rules to fit with this 1.2 millimeter requirement. I wanted to do today a focus on origin because it has changed 1 or 2 years ago. And so I think it was quite important to be sure we are all in a good knowledge of what is necessary for food labeling right now on this specific mention. So the Article 26 indicates that the country of origin or place of provenance of food should be mandatory if the fact not to add it could mislead the consumer, of course, or if it concerns specific needs. So we have the list already in the regulation. There is another reason why we should add the country of origin. It is when, for example, the country of origin of a food is given and it's different from its primary ingredient. So this is the part which changed some years ago. To understand well this change, first it's important to have the good understanding of the definition of the primary ingredient. The primary ingredient means any ingredient present in the food which represent more than 50% of the food or which is usually associated with the name of this food. If you are in one of this situation, you consider that you have a primary ingredient in your formulation. If it is the case, and if you mention the origin of your food product, then you will need to follow the new Commission implementing regulation of 2018, the number 775. So there are not so many articles in the regulation. Main ones are Article 2 and 3. The Article 3 is more about the presentation of the information. It says that you have to put the indication of the country of origin of your primary ingredient in the same field of vision as the indication of the country of origin of your food. And it explains also that it has to be in a size not less than 75% of the size of the indication of the country of origin of your food product. The Article 2 is more to tell you how to put the country of origin, what level of detail you need to add for your primary ingredients. And here you see the type of geographical areas that you can use. So it's not mandatory to add a member state or any third country. You can just keep the information about EU, non-EU, etc. But at least people should be aware that the primary ingredients are not coming from the country where the food product is manufactured. This can be quite difficult to put in place for some sector. We are facing lots of issues in the food supplement categories, for example. This is why you need to follow the guidances that exist in your own sector. For example, in France, Synadiet, the French Association for Food Supplement, defines some guidances explaining that, for example, for synthetic ingredients or for additives, even if they are put in the legal name and even if they are in a quantity upper than 50% of your product, they should be considered as exempted from this definition of a primary ingredient. This could be, for example, different in some other food product categories. This is why it's important to have a vision sector by sector. So to help you with this regulation, FIC regulation, you have several guidances. Most interesting ones are listed here. So we have the questions and answer on general and nutrition labeling. We have the guidance on allergens, the guidance on the quantity of ingredients that have to be indicated in percentage, the guidance on the origin, and it includes also the more information on what is considered as a primary ingredient, and the guidance on nutrition labeling, specifically for the tolerances that can be accepted in terms of quantity added to the nutrition labeling. So you can find it in the link here. And for the pending implementing acts, I just wanted to make a little point on this part because we are still waiting for some acts that were put in this regulation of 2011 and that were not considered as a priority for European Commission. So what we are still waiting for is at least an implementing act on this voluntary food information about allergens that could come from unintentional presence in the food or through the process. So this is something we continue to highlight in general with the term may contain traces of or this kind of mentions that are suggested by European associations for food products, but it is not harmonized yet. The same thing for all the mentions with vegetarians or vegans. The suitability of some food with these populations. This is also more linked to private standards, private labels, but without any harmonization at the EU level. Also, the free from allergen claims, except from the gluten-free, which was implemented through a regulation a few years ago. For other allergens, we still do not have any regulation on the use of free from claims. So this kind of example shows that even if the regulation is now in place for several years, we still have some acts that we are waiting for. And we also have, in parallel to that, other reviews that are in progress. And this is linked to other regulation, other plans, other strategies that were put in place in Europe to increase again, the safety of the consumer, it's good information, etc. So the main ones that I wanted to highlight are the ones that are linked to the Farm to Fork strategy that was adopted on May 2020 and 20 by European Commission, and that could lead to a change of the regulation in at least for the drafting part in 2022. So we have the main one, which concerns the harmonization of mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling with a link with nutrient profiles. So as you may know, we still do not have any nutrient profile at EU level. We have some member states who defined scorings, who defined a new way of putting in relief the nutrition labeling. It can be also from private standards, etc. But at the EU level, we still wait for the nutrient profiles, which were defined in the Nutrition and Health Claim Regulation, and we still do not have a mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling. So this is really in progress of, um, of discussion with the European Commission, the member states, and also they asked EFSA to provide scientific advice for the development of this harmonized information. And we obtained a few weeks ago some feedbacks from EFSA with its publication of their advice. So I strongly advise you to have a look to these new advices that should impact the new requirements for this mention in the future. Lots of EU member states would also like to extend the use of mandatory origin for new products. So, for example, if in France we have news on honey, cocoa, this kind of ingredients for which it seems really important to have this information of the origin. At the EU level, it should be also integrated to the new regulation. And one last point that is really important and that is linked also to the wish at the EU level to reduce food waste is a review of the current date marking, because the use by date and the best before dates are not really understood by the consumer today and lead to too many food waste currently. So this is why also new rules should help the consumer to use better its products. As part of the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, we also should have a new requirement for alcoholic beverage, for which we should have a mandatory ingredient list and nutrition declaration, which was not mandatory in the past. As mentioned previously, we also wait for this new nanomaterial definition, which should impact also the regulation on food information to consumer. Of course, if the definition change, maybe the number of products which will have to be highlighted as nano will change. So lots of studies and discussions are in progress and should impact the labeling in the future in an objective to find the best options for EU consumer in terms of safety, sustainability, etc. So this was for the FIC regulation. If I move to the nutrition and health claim regulation, here again we are with a regulatory text that is quite old, but that is still challenged by the authorities and by the consumers, of course, because we have still some difficulty to have a full harmonized framework for all the type of claims in Europe. So the regulation 1924 of 2006 applies since 2007. And the objective was to have finally exhaustive list of nutrition and health claims for the whole European market. In 2012, 2013, we had the first list of permitted health claims for generic claims, the ones that were not referring to the reduction of disease risk or to children's developmental health. Then we had other regulation for health claims which were directly dedicated to children's health and reduction of disease risk. All those claims were added to a register, which facilitates a lot the access to this information. And the register also adds all the forbidden claims. So you know now what you can put in your labeling, what you cannot put in your labeling. Unfortunately, This is still not an exhaustive list because we still wait for the assessment of the claims on botanicals. So this was one of the negative conclusion of the refit claims that was done in 2020 in May, and for which the conclusion showed the limitation of this regulation with the absence of nutrient profiles, as I previously mentioned to you, and also the pending claims on botanicals that still impact a lot the market. So this will be detailed a little bit later. I wanted also to remind you that from beginning of this year, it is now totally forbidden to include in your brands claims that are not accepted through, for example, the positive list of health claims that are still in the register or in the pending list. So all those trade names that were in a transition period because they were existing before 2005 now need to be totally in compliance with the regulation. Just wanted to remind you the different categories of claims we have in Europe. So we have the nutrition claims, such as source of calcium, for example. We have an exhaustive list in the regulation, so you do not have the right to use other nutrition claims than the ones that are listed. Then we have the health claims, and it is for this kind of claims that we have several options. So the generic claims are the one for which we had lots and lots of dossiers that were submitted by industrial before 2008, and for which we have already positive and negative lists. So one example is, for example, the case of calcium, which is necessary for bone normal function, for example. And we have another article which concerns a specific health claim for which proprietary data exist and that you can still continue to request for approval through the European Commission and EFSA assessment. So this is the article 13.5 health claim. Other two categories of health claim are the one for reduction of disease risk and the one specifically for children's developmental health in reference to the Article 14 of the regulation. What is important to note is that in this list of authorized claims for food product, we do not include therapeutic claims. Indeed, therapeutic claims should be only for use for medicinal products, drugs. Guidances exist at national level to help you to define the claims that could impact the status of your product and that could be considered as borderline claims. So unfortunately, this is more existing at the national levels than that at the EU level. That is why it is important to go through each member states to see if we have a specific guidance helping us to find the good way to address for the wording of your claim to be sure it's not a therapeutic claim. So Belgium, Netherlands, etc. already prepared some guidance on that. Just wanted to highlight the fact that in France, authorities are working on a database that should be published in the next weeks. So hopefully we have a better idea at the national level of which type of pending claims can be tolerated and which type of pending claims should be forbidden because considered as therapeutic claims. We also have questions and answers at the national level, which helps us to use very well the NHC regulation. It explains, for example, that beauty claims are outside of the scope of the NHC regulation. So it helps a lot also to find what is included in the regulation, what is out of the scope, what is also kind of borderline. And it's always in the idea not to be misleading for the consumer. I gave you some example of some issues that we could face while we were submitting some dossier in national countries. So we could face issues with the term stress or libido in Belgium, for example. They were considered as therapeutic claims. We could face also issues with the term detox in Germany, which is really difficult to substantiate. And we could also face difficulty to use pending claims in Greece. So these are some examples just to show you that it can be difficult to communicate in the same way in all the EU member states because of these therapeutic claims that are not well harmonized. We have an authorization process if you want to still to add a new claims in the positive list. And for that, you need to characterize your food, to give sufficient information to allow the characterization of the claimed effect, and of course, to give sufficient data to substantiate your health claim. So I put here the frame, the procedures that applies. So as I said, the refit of claim that was published in May was showed some inconsistencies and also discrepancies. So because of this lack of harmonization of on botanicals, because we have some positive lists that are at the national level, they want to prepare a positive list of claims, but without any harmonization of the botanical and of the methodology, it is quite hard. So of course, it gives some issues with the market because we still have some products which have not been assessed at all in terms of claim by EU authorities and that still can continue to communicate. And if we compare it with some negative opinions that were given on substances, it's true that it is not so easy to understand from a general point of view to have all these discrepancies. They consider that safety of botanicals should be reinforced and that they really need to set the nutrient profile. So that is why also they continue with this strategy to add these nutrient profiles as part of and to work on that as part of the farm to fork strategy. So waiting for this finalized list of pending claims, we wanted to highlight the fact that in a recent case law on claims, European Court of Justice confirmed that it is up to the industrial to confirm the substantiation of their claims and not to the authorities, etc. So it means that if you want to use a pending claim, you will need to be able to prepare a scientific file, including, if possible, clinical data and also data coming from monograph and traditional data to prove the effectiveness of your ingredient at the dose present in your product and to prove that the product is bioavailable, of course. So this has to be confirmed by your side and will be assessed during any inspection you could have by the authorities. And we see that more and more sanctions are given when you use unauthorized claims or therapeutic claims. So I wanted just to show you that some associations work on graded evaluation just to help also authorities to think about a new way of thinking for these botanical claims. They suggest, for example, different type of wording depending on the level of proof that we can have. For example, we could use A contributes to B if we have a very high level of proof, or A can contribute to B if the level of proof is a little bit less, and A is traditionally used for B if here we just have data coming from monographs. So this can be something to think about and to share with the authorities, maybe to find a way to have access to a finalized list of positive claim for botanicals with these graduations. And for probiotics and probiotics, I just wanted to tell you that even if normally it shouldn't be authorized for without any positive health claim on probiotics because of the World Health Organization definition, more and more EU member states want to accept this generic term. This was already the case in Italy for a long time, and now we have more and more countries starting to tolerate this use of this term, including Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, and also we should obtain this position in France in the near future. So I just wanted to finalize this presentation with the issue we can face when we want to prepare multilingual packaging because of some national rules that are different and that are not harmonized at the EU level. So first issue is use of the term natural for your clean label, because the definition of natural is still not harmonized for food products. It is now quite harmonized for cosmetic products, for example, with ISO norms that exist. We do not have the equivalence in food products. And in general, it makes it very difficult to have an harmonization for this term in all the EU member states. So the use of from natural origin is a little bit easier to use because it can include some processed ingredient, but still you have to have a look to the production process and to its impact on the naturality to be sure not to face issues with your authorities. Free-from claims also are not really harmonized, except from the ones that are included in the NIC regulation, which concern more the natural presence of some ingredients, for example. So, except from this kind of harmonization, we need to go through specific guidance that can exist in each member state. And so I give you some example of reform claims which are regulated more at the national level, so such as free from GMOs, free from additives, which are more linked with absence of denigration of the other products present in the market, or free from palm oil, which depends on what you mean by free from palm oil. For example, if you consider it is an environmental claim, maybe it could be accepted in EU countries. Whereas if you consider it more as a nutrition claim because of its content of fatty acid, then it would be forbidden because, as I said, the positive list of nutrition claim is an exhaustive list which doesn't contain anything linked with palm oil. So, so yes, this is really interesting just to see that it's not so easy to use free-from claims right now. The same for allergens, even if we have more data now for gluten. For other allergens, it can be quite tricky to use this kind of claim if you cannot prove a complete absence of each allergen in your food product. So that was more for the free-from claims. And also another difficulty is all the news we have currently with the recycling instructions that are updated in some member states. So for example, in Italy, in France, it's already part of the new regulations. And of course, it can impact the multilingual packaging because it adds additional requirements to all the mandatory requirements you already have at the EU level. And so if you have a little packaging, it can be quite tricky to add all this information in the same labeling. So I showed you what will be mandatory at the end of the transition period, which will be in September for France. So it means that if you sell the product in France, you should add this kind of recycling instructions, which is quite uh, long still. So this also I wanted to make you aware of that because it is this case in France, but in Italy it is different. Maybe in other countries it will be different in the near future. So of course it includes lots of revision of your labelings. And my last slide will be about the future sustainability labeling framework. That is not ready for now, but for which the objective is to avoid greenwashing and also to transfer consumption patterns in a more sustainable direction. So, of course, every authority at the national level or at the EU level want to reduce the environmental footprint of products consumed in the EU and contribute to the overall policy objective of EU climate neutrality by 2050. So, of course, it impacts food products, and maybe it will impact also some food labelings because I will maybe more make in relief, put in relief the climate, environmental, social, nutrition aspects directly in the labeling if they are substantiated. So we need to follow up this news to know what will be the method that will be recognized, what will be possible to to put in the labels what will be totally forbidden and what will be the new initiative to take to apply to this green transition for a sustainable product policy. So this is quite interesting and not really finalized for now. So it's more just to have a look, to listen to all the discussions they have on these projects, to see what could be the changes you could do in your labelings and in your packaging too, to increase the quality of those products in terms of environmental aspects. So that's all for me for today. So thank you for your time. If you have any other question, you can feel free to contact us. And we will be also present in Vitafoods Europe at stand number 170. So feel free to go visit us. Thank you.